In college algebra, we started working with complex numbers. So a complex number is when you want to take a square root of a negative. So like this right here. And the reason why it's complex, you can see right away when you type it into the calculator. So let's look at the calculator. If we try and type in square root of negative 25, we get an error. It calls it a non-real calculation. Some calculators, if you bought the fancy one, it'll give you the complex calculation, but this one it won't. You know, we all know if we square root 25, we do get 5. But if you square root negative 25, there's no real number times itself that'll equal negative 25, which is why it's now called complex. But that being said, it's actually very easy. So if ever you get square root of negative 1, we call it I. So these are the two rules we need to follow at the very top, right here. So for example, on example 1a, we could change this to square root of 25 times square root of times negative 1. And then we could break it into two pieces. You really don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you know what's going on, you could just write the final answer. And I imagine whoever it was that thought this up decided they were tired of writing square root of negative 1, and they decided, I'm just going to write an I instead. And now we have a whole lesson over it. So that's the way you'd calculate square root of negative 25. For that negative 1, you just call it I. So same idea on B. Let's break down negative 50. First of all, we have 50 times negative 1. And then you can break it down to 25 times 2 times negative 1. And then, like you've done before, a few weeks ago, you can break it into individual radicals. And you can write the answer as this. Or I typically write it with the I to the left of the radical, like this. I'll take either way. Just make sure you don't continue that radical over the I. So, you know, this line right here can't go over the I like that. So it's got to look like that if you decide to write to the right of the radical. All right? All right, let's look at how to simplify. Well, we've simplified a little bit, but what if we get a more complicated expression? So the nice thing with number 2 and kind of with number 3 is we just need to combine like terms. This plus sign right here tells us we are not multiplying. The parentheses are not necessary. Let's say not needed. They do that to organize expressions, but if you have a plus sign between them, or even a negative between them, like on B right here, you can just drop the parentheses. All right? So on example 2a, you literally get rid of the parentheses by not writing them, and you write plus 7 plus 4i, and you treat this just like it's identical to if you were to simplify this expression right here. You would add the constants, 5 and 7, and you would add the i's or the x's, negative 11x plus 4x. So it is the exact same process. That would be that one. This one here, the actual problem, would be this. All right. 2b is very similar, except you do need to deal with that negative because there's a negative outside the parenthesis. So I got to flip signs. So I get plus 1 plus 6i. And then I combine like terms. So we get negative 4 plus 13i. A little bit different, or something a little extra happens on example 3. I don't see anything typed between here, right here, and then again right there. That means we multiply. So very different from example 2. All right, be careful. I need to multiply 4i times those two things on the inside. So I need to go 4i times that, 4i times that. And I get 12i, and I get negative 20i squared, which is different. We can now take that one step further. Look at the very top of your page. It says I squared equals negative 1. The idea there is that back a few weeks ago we had something like this, and we said it's 5. Same idea here. If I have I times I have negative 1 times square root of negative 1, which gives me negative 1. So I squared is negative 1. So let's take example 3a one step further. I can now write that, which then becomes that, and we got it. All right, let's try one more. On B, I FOIL this out. So I go 7 times negative 2, 7 times negative 5i, negative 3i times negative 2, and then the weird one, negative 3i times negative 5i gives me positive 15i squared. If I were you, I would write as many steps as you can because people mess up on the signs all the time. I'm going to have a lot of steps here. So we go negative 14. I can combine these two into negative 29i. But look, we have an I squared. I can change that to a negative 15. And then lastly, final answer, negative 29 minus 29i. And that was all we did in class. Hope that makes sense. I will see y'all later.